and welcome to this episode of the Love Procurement Podcast. My name is Kelly Barner, and I will be your host for this conversation. Today, I'm glad to welcome back Pascal Bensoussan, Chief Product Officer at Ivalua. He was with us back in episode 5 to talk about why and how generative AI is changing procurement. And today we're going to build on that conversation, both bringing us up to date in terms of new developments and then looking forward into the future. So, hi, Pascal. Thank you so much for being back with me.
Hello, Kelly, and thank you for having me. I'm super happy to be able to give you a bit of an update.
Well, and generative AI is one of those places where, not that I'm committing you to this, but you could almost have a weekly update, a monthly update, because things are changing so fast. So it's been a few months since we last had you on to talk about this. If we start sort of relationally, where would you say procurement currently is in terms of their journey to accept and adopt and make use of generative AI?
So it's interesting. As a question, we've run a number of boot camps with partners and customers of Ivalua across the globe, in New York, in Montreal, in Paris, and there is a very strong level of interest. So that's very clear. What we see is many procurement organizations stumble a little bit on what do I do next? How do I get started? My
Yeah.
legal team needs to be involved. How about data and security? How about privacy? Do I need to involve my IT team? And so we're starting to see that the procurement teams want to move forward, but they need to check a lot of boxes to be able to
Yes.
get started. So that's an issue. We're of course addressing them by making it very easy to understand all aspects of kind of the transparency, the governance on around AI that we have in place, the how we protect and guarantee protection and confidentiality of our customer data. But that takes some cycle. Most of the procurement organizations don't know how to introduce generative AI in their
Yeah.
organization. They don't even know where their organization is in terms of their IT and corporate strategy relative to generative AI. So that takes a little bit of time to get started. We see some chief procurement officer being uh, very clear within their organization with some level of power and leverage to really push forward that agenda faster than others.
Yeah.
But I think that will take some time. So the level of interest is very high. Some of our customers are able to move faster than others. So I think there is a cycle, and we should expect it with any new technology that will take some time.
Well, it's been an interesting process to watch because, in a way, we have two maturity journeys happening at the same time. So there's the technology itself, which keeps improving with each release, with each application. But then there's the human side of understanding how it works and getting used to the idea of working with it. And even to your point, thinking, okay, who else do I need to check with? What are the security issues? What are the risk issues? What are the data issues? Which would you say is maturing faster, the technology itself or the people that are trying to make use of this technology in productive ways?
Right. So that's it's very. I mean, it's also a very good question. The technology moves really fast, and
Yeah.
when we say technology, there is Ivalua as a technology provider, and we certainly apply a lot of our own kind of intellectual property and technology to deliver a usable generative AI based application and features. But there is the large language model technology itself. Think OpenAI. On Anthropic, Gemini from Google,
Yep.
Llama 3. Those models are evolving very quickly. They became multimodal. They're becoming smarter with ability to stop and reason and think and create a much more structured and deeper response. We move our platform in our ability to work with different tools, to work with those LLM, factor in code and generate a lot of how the kind of the mechanism to embed generative AI in the core fabric, in the backbone of our system, right? So that it becomes really the operating system of our platform. We're moving fast on that front. The good news is our customers don't need to know all of that. However, what we see is that many of them, even though we decided originally to provide a configurable approach to leverage the uniqueness of their environment, of their implementation, of their knowledge and workflow, and what they're trying to accomplish to build their own agents, if you will. We call them skills,
Yeah.
via configuration, to basically create their own prompts, leverage their own data, and then decide to create new flows, new use cases on their own. What we see is that our customers are not yet at that level. Their intuition for how can I embed generative AI in a business context to address a business problem is not there yet. They don't have the intuition yet because they haven't worked enough with generative AI,
Yeah.
because maybe they don't understand enough the core benefits, or not the benefits, the core enablers of the technology. What can I do reasonably with Gen AI? What is not available via Gen AI? What is really Gen AI versus just using business rules and just trying to retrieve the base and executing a set of a workflow that doesn't actually leverage any generative AI. Right now, there's a lot of confusion about where can I really leverage generative AI. And I think what we're seeing is that our customers are basically saying, show me the way. Instead of giving me a few features here and there that you've built to kind of show
Yeah.
that, yeah, I can use generative AI to create an email to my suppliers. I can use generative AI to proofread the content of an RFP. I can use generative AI to summarize a contract. Those are what I call one and done features. Like you execute them once, you're done, in and out, it's sprinkled all over the product. But is that operating system? Is that an operating system? Is that using generative AI in the essential flow of a business flow? Not quite. And so what I think our customers are saying is, I need you to show me how, for example, you would embed generative AI in my onboarding process for suppliers. And that's onboarding a supplier is a complete end-to-end flow, right? I need to tell the supplier, I need to invite them, get them to come in. Am I going to offer them a conversational experience, a support agent that says, hello there, you've been invited to this RFP. I need to start collecting information from you, making it easy to drag and drop documents, automatically identify the kind of document they have provided, kind of guide them through the process of onboarding. At that point, we're now using generative AI completely embedded in a flow, and the configurator or our customer doesn't need to know where it's being used and how it's being used. So today, I think to develop that intuition, that magic aspect,
Yeah.
they need to see us deliver those capabilities embedded in the core flow of the source to pay suite.
Well, and it is interesting too, because working in procurement is a very digital role, but we're not IT professionals. And it's interesting that you talk about the intuition of finding different ways to test and implement this technology. It's actually very different than the types of skills that procurement typically brings to their work. And so while it's maybe creating some challenges for us as we embed this new technology in what we do, it's actually an amazing learning opportunity for us to start thinking digital first about a series of processes or operations or tasks that we do. So there's going to be something on the other side of generative AI, just to say. It'll be interesting to see when the next amazingly disruptive technology comes down the line. How does this experience we're going through today potentially prepare procurement to handle that with a different level of mature or built-in intuition?
Yeah, exactly. And I think we are listening to our customers. Um, it is not because they don't understand generative AI, then they are not able to formulate a set of hopes and needs that they think could be accomplished with generative AI technology. Many of them will not be able to tell you how and where exactly in this overall solution that they're trying to have in mind. we would leverage generative AI, but they know that the solution would be more efficient, more automated, smarter with the use of generative AI, and they have a hope that some of those processes that they're currently tackling with that are very human intensive,
Yeah.
where you have to type a lot of information, can be guided and aided via generative AI. And so I think they're right. And so we see recurring needs around intake management, which is really cool because I think
Mhm.
there is a very, very strong opportunity for Ivalua. We see needs around conversational analytics, of being able to interrogate the system about anything, and at the end translate what the user is asking. What are my top 10 suppliers in based on spend in the last 12 months for aluminum, and having the system being able to understand what they're saying, automatically set those calls at the back end of the database to find exactly that information, and then provide that information with some links for navigation and some next steps, right? So I think we have our customers are telling us where they wish and they hope that we can take them with
Yeah.
generative AI, and we're listening because I think we're seeing that there's a lot of opportunities to add value. Um, I intake management is the latest one, which is really interesting.
Now, you talked a little bit when we opened this conversation about some of the different large language models, OpenAI being an example, Gemini from Google, right? To what extent is the value of generative AI wrapped up in the LLM that you choose? And to what extent does the value come from how it integrates, how it's implemented? What level of knowledge does procurement need to know about the language model behind their AI?
Well, the good news is that they don't need to know anything about the language model. What I think that's not going to be as much their decision, and it will be probably a corporate decision, probably driven by an IT strategy that says there is some LLMs that or an LLM technology that we're going to bet on. Maybe it's going to be Anthropic running on AWS. Maybe it's going to be OpenAI running on Microsoft Azure or directly with OpenAI. Maybe it will be Llama 3 running in our own because it's open source, but running in our own infrastructure. They will make those choices. After that, those models are comparable, compatible in terms of how ahead they are relative to kind of where we were, I would say, a year or a year and a half ago. Um, I still have, I must say, I'm still in awe with where OpenAI is taking us, particularly with models like O1, which are models that are able to create structured responses and think through complex problems.
Mhm.
Because what OpenAI has done with O1 is embed in the model itself the ability to explore multiple paths in trying to respond to the question of an end
Okay.
user, self-check some of those paths in terms of which path is the best way to answer the question. And instead of looking at just all those paths side by side, it's really looking at it as a decision tree where as you go down that tree and you formulate your approach to responding that question with a structure and more deliberate plan for how you're going to address it, you can branch in one direction or another dynamically because it will lead a better answer, right? And so they have embedded that into their O1 model, which explains why sometimes O1 takes the time to think. So when you submit a request, you're going to see O1 doing a lot of things and taking
Yeah.
6, 7, 8 seconds, sometimes 10, 20 seconds to deliver a response. But that response is going very far in terms of its structure, its flow, and the depth of and accuracy and relevance of the response. So I think we see a lot of that happening with OpenAI. I think the latest models from Anthropic, particularly Haiku 3.5, follows also that ability to work through a chain of thoughts. That's what we call them. To be multimodal, working with image, sounds, video, and text. And so I think those models are evolving very fast, and they're still an enabler. I think on the other hand, what we see is that our customers have the messy of business, which is my data, my
Yeah.
documents, my workflows, my business rules, and that's messy. It's defined on the fly, it's defined, there's some logic, there is some procurement policy in a document, there is a bunch of business rules somewhere, there is a workflow somewhere. And then you need to somehow tie that world, the business world, with that LLM. The LLM needs some level of grounding and information structured in a certain
Yeah.
way. And so where we spend a lot of time is building the bridge, the layer in between that allows a certain level of configuration of what you want your Eva, in our case, our chat agent, to do. And you can give it different skills, and you can say, I want you to do those kind of different things. I'm going to ask you those types of questions. I want you to collect that kind of information, or to do those things. And then between that side where you configure whatever you want and the LLM that can start planning and stop and thinking to reason, you need a layer in between that will understand what you're trying to do, leverage the ability of the LLM to think and reason, to say, okay, to answer your question, I'm going to search the internet. I'm going to search information in a database. I'm going to find deep in a document some of the relevant information that you need. I'm going to aggregate that information. I'm going to organize it for you. I'm then going to leverage the LLM and ask some questions. I will use the output of that LLM to create another prompt dynamically, to then again ask the LLM with some more information that can be conditional to the next step. And so that orchestration in the middle is what somehow establish a bridge between the messy real world of data business
Yeah.
rules that we deal with as human every day. That's not perfect. That's very ambiguous, with the almost perfect world of the LLM, doing its own reasoning and thinking and content or response generation, right? Token generation. In between, you still need that bridge, and that's what we spend a lot of time building.
Well, when you talk about those two worlds, I'm still, my mind is going back to you were talking about, I think you said it was the O1 model, where it might take 8 seconds or 20 seconds because it's working itself through like a decision tree to figure out what sort of information to share. When you line that up next to the very messy, unexpected human world, 8 seconds or 20 seconds is not a very long time to wait.
Pretty good,
In the
isn't it?
computer world, that's probably days, right? The
Right.
way we would think. This is like translating things from people years to dog years. But it's amazing that if you say to someone, listen, just wait 20 seconds instead of 8 seconds, and your answer is going to be X fold better. That is incredible to think that that small of a time could make that big of a difference.
And as much as the LLM is able to do this, it's called that inference time, meaning while it's trying to infer a response, it's able to leverage all the data and assets it's been trained on or it has access to, right? Yes, but it doesn't have access to the confidential data of the enterprise.
True.
Right? And so this is where we spend a lot of time to harness that amazing engine, which is where those LLMs are going, by saying, I'm going to give you the right information at the right time. I'm going to use you to help me create a flow of execution that will allow you to kind of step by step figure out different things and respond ultimately to that question. Create a proper market research for a commodity, organize and orchestrate the onboarding flow for a supplier, engage with an end user that has no knowledge of your procurement kind of flow and forms, into a very intuitive intake flow to capture their needs. All of that can be done by having that orchestration flow in the middle.
Now, this is probably a very procurement question, Pascal, but when you talk about the internal or proprietary information that the LLM does not have, as a procurement professional, I feel very defensive of my company's spend and supplier data. To what extent should I trust the model or systems that use the model and share some of that information? And to what extent should we be concerned about potential exposure associated with bringing all of these information sources together?
So let's be clear. There is no LLM market if the fear that by giving the LLM my own confidential data provides a confidentiality violation somewhere where someone would have access to my data. There's no market for it. There's no market. The market is dead.
Yeah.
It's dead on arrival. So what Microsoft and Anthropic and Google have been spending a lot of time doing is making sure that when you have an API access, enterprise API access to their LLM technology, then that data is isolated. It works within maybe even one session. It is not stored. It is not used to train that LLM to provide better answer later to someone else, which could leverage your own information. It is not happening. It is not shared with third party. It is only used, contained in your usage, in your API call of that LLM. Of course, the trust factor will take some time to settle.
Yeah.
As I said last year, it took 10 years for many companies or 15 years for companies to move from on-premise to the cloud and trust the cloud providers that
Especially
their,
with spend
their data was
analysis. That's
secure.
right.
Right? I think it will take 2 years for companies because the
Okay.
imperative to move to LLM technology as an enabler of your business is much, much higher. And the velocity and the speed with which it's happening is much, much higher. That people that are not embracing it will be left in the dust, left behind.
No,
So I think I understand the concerns.
yeah.
We're doing everything we can to address it. Uh, but I think people will have to, at some point, get the assurance through contract, through terms of use, that their data is not going to be at risk, and get started. And then time will tell. I mean, we'll see. Maybe in next year we'll have a first major issue where an LLM company recognized that there was a leak and the data leaked, and that will have certainly a big issue on the industry. But it
For
has
the whole
happened everywhere.
market.
It has
Yeah.
happened everywhere with every database company, every cloud company, every company that was entrusted with data. There has been leaks and issues. It will probably happen with LLM. Does it mean that the LLM industry itself is flawed? The data is systematically shared? No, there is a lot of protection that are being put in
Yeah.
place to ensure that that's not the case.
Now, based on the conversations that you're having, a lot of what started the conversation around AI early this year is that the C suite was actually going to procurement or supply chain and saying, where are you putting this in our tech stack? We want you to be using it. Where are you putting it? Are you hearing that those conversations are still happening, that the pressure or the encouragement, maybe we should say, is as great from the top down for procurement to be taking these steps?
So the answer is yes and no. I feel that because we offer a system that is in our procurement suite that is self-defined, where it's packaged with its own LLM, we have a number of customers that, as long as they have basically checked the box with their IT organization, their legal team, their infosec team, or architectural review team, that everything is fine, then they will just turn on Eva within our application. In fact, now we're offering Eva at no additional cost to our customers as part of the platform, and that's clearly lowers the hurdle significantly.
Yeah.
And so we're starting to see a number of companies just go and try it, independently of what their IT organization and overall corporate strategy would be and how it's shaping up in terms of what LLM they're going to define and use. They're not waiting
Yeah.
for their CIO to decide. As long as they remain within a certain policy driven by the CIO, then they are starting to execute, because there is a lot of value in starting to learn and iterate on LLM technology now. Um, I guess that what reassures them is that they all know that if at some point a specific LLM technology is put forward within their organization, then they will be able to plug it in our platform, and there won't be any change. So
Yeah.
that means that they're not investing time that will be lost in that learning, in that how to integrate generative AI within their procurement processes. So we see that clearly. The other thing that we see is that many CPOs are driving the discussion up to their CIO, because we're starting to offer capabilities that are, I would say, CIO level. For example, procurement organizations are now trying to extend their procurement process outside of procurement, into supply chain, into IT, into facility management, HR, and finance. Because many of their processes, when it's about paying a supplier, onboarding an employee, and getting a computer and so on,
Yeah.
managing the supply chain and logistics, or managing a building where you have a lease and there's a number of things that need to happen, um, involve flows that are crossing beyond just the procurement organization. At the same time, we see also the procurement organization getting much more visibility outside of their team of professional buyers and commodity managers, of anyone who has a need, wanting to express that need and get that need being fulfilled, potentially via a sourcing, a contracting, a
Mm.
procurement process, and maybe even outside of procurement, as I mentioned, right? And that also explains why we see the industry intake management category growing up and emerging.
Yeah.
Initially, we dismissed it a little bit, like in the last 2 years, because we said if intake management is just about source to pay, we have all the elements, all the components. I don't need an orchestration system to kind of orchestrate disparate, disconnected solution, because I offer you the whole suite
Right.
and we already have that baked into our solution. But as procurement is taking some heights, addressing a wider user base across the entire organization, connecting their processes outside, we definitely start to see the need for intake management. The beauty is that intake management is becoming very intuitive and beautiful when you put generative AI to collect input from the users. When you say, I'm going to put you in front of an agent who is going to ask you and generate and dynamically generate questions to figure out what you need. So Kelly, you're coming to me and you're saying, hey, I have a new employee coming, and not sure where to start. Well, Eva understands that there is a specific flow for onboarding employees. It starts maybe with signing the employment contract with that employee, maybe asking for a badge, asking for a laptop,
Yeah.
asking facility to reserve a desk for the employee, collecting the W-9, and the collecting a signature on code of conduct for that employee, then directing that employee to an onboarding guide or an onboarding flow where they can start their onboarding. That flow needs to be some aspect of it, getting the laptop, getting a desk, getting a badge, could be part of a procurement uh, job. Getting W-9 signed, getting code of conduct signed, it's more HR.
Yeah.
Getting facility to assign the desk and prepare the desk is more facilities. So then you can imagine that if you have a generative AI that understands what questions to ask without having to fill out a complex form that collect everything, gives you a conversational experience to tell that you have a new employee, they're coming next week, next month, they need those kind of laptop, they are an engineer, so they need a more powerful laptop, blah, blah, blah. All those things that would be wrapped into a conversational experience. That now is very, very nice. That's where we're delivering. And that gives us access to the CIO, because now the CIO is saying, the CPO is saying, well, this is intake management. I'm going to address the entire company.
Yeah.
I need the CIO approval for that type of solution. It's no longer just a procurement solution. I need my CIO. And so the CIO is looking at it as a service solution. And I think that with intake management and orchestration and the ability to connect not only Ivalua as a source to pay system, but an IT system, a HR system, a finance system, because we have fundamentally the generative AI and the integration layer to make that happen and the workflow logic to make that happen, we're starting to push the CIO to agree to an approach, to agree to a decision in terms of LLM. So I think it goes both ways.
Yeah.
Let the CIO make their decision, get started on your end, right? Because you're source to pay and you have Eva. Elevate the dialogue with things like intake management and assist or work closely with the CIO to fine tune the IT strategy around working with LLMs at a corporate level. And we see both happening.
I think what's most interesting to me about that is that what the technology is capable of doing, as long as we're staying up on sort of the latest of what's possible, is going to start to challenge the way we think about getting things done. So that process that you talked through about onboarding the new employee, absolutely. Some of that would traditionally fall within procurement scope anyway, but a lot of it doesn't at all. It's been managed separately in the past because that was how the processes or the systems that were in place were set up, but that's no longer necessary. And as systems make all that easier, it's going to come back to us as people to realize that and say, oh my gosh, we can completely knock down this one wall of silo because we truly don't need it anymore. So I'm curious, Pascal, as this technology continues to develop so quickly, and we're really trying hard as human beings to keep our thought process running at the same speed or just a little bit behind it, how do we stay connected to the latest developments so that as we create a vision for our team, for our company, we're taking full advantage of everything that's possible?
Wow. There is no replacement for asking, browsing the web, looking
Yeah.
for white paper, taking some class. There is a huge number of classes that are beginner, intermediate, or advanced on generative AI. Some of them are very business oriented. They will just tell you how, as a business, you should absorb, embed generative AI capabilities in your thinking. Some of them are more technical in terms of how to write prompts, and some of them are hyper technical. It's how to build LLM and foundation LLM,
Okay.
and so on. So you don't need to go all of the way there. So I think first, I would encourage every company to start putting together some curriculum around generative AI to at least develop a culture around
Yeah.
that's generative AI ready, in terms of being able to embrace what generative AI can do and develop an intuition for what generative AI can do. I think that intuition is coming, like the procurement team that's obviously evaluating many solutions out there in the market for themselves or for other organizations. They are, particularly when they are looking at different software solutions. They are in the RFPs that they are writing. They are seeing responses from software vendors that obviously have embedded generative AI in their own capabilities. And I think that is really interesting for procurement teams to start developing an understanding for what's possible with generative AI.
Yeah.
Because as I'm trying to source a marketing PR communication tool, I realized that as I look at the market and try to evaluate different vendors, I'm starting to see through the RFP responses that some of them have embedded generative AI in their tool to do this use case, this other
Mm.
use case, to assist me in writing the PR. Maybe looking that PR is not referencing things that don't exist, or that can create and collect quotes by searching the internet for relevant quotes that could be used in my press release. I don't know. I'm inventing those use cases on the fly
Sure.
as I'm talking to you. But the point is that when you start seeing those use cases and looking at them through literature, through use cases, through RFPs, you obviously develop an intuition for
Yeah.
what you can do with generative AI. So I think procurement team are very well positioned to learn firsthand what's possible in the generative AI world. Uh, but I think organizations need to develop that curriculum, that appetite, that culture for embracing that technology, because it is disruptive. It will be an enabler for a lot of automation and efficiency. I truly believe that.
And it does need to be embraced culturally as much as it does technically. So, as we continue to have these conversations and learn more about what generative AI is capable of, I have a feeling we're going to continue to learn just as much about ourselves and how we interact with that technology as we
Right,
go.
right. And
Um,
as I mentioned, I mean, if I was to tell you a little bit of where I see this going, right now you have to
sure.
be a bit prescriptive in telling an LLM, here is my prompt, here is what I want you to do, here is my data. Once you have done that, then let me tell you that let me tell you the next step. You should do this and you should do that. So think of it as there is a product manager or a configurator or a solution architect who is designing a flow and deliberately plugging in that flow generative AI to help, right? I think what we're seeing more and more, and maybe it's a year from now, 2 years from now, is that you'll give generative AI an objective and you'll say, this is my objective. You'll give it a database schema. You say, here is my data, here's how it's structured, and so on. And you have access to it. You can query it, you can do whatever you want to figure it out. Now, here's my problem. Go and solve it. Do it for me. The flow itself, the step that it will take, will be generated by generative AI. The path to figure out the right way to get the information, to use that information to accomplish a specific objective, to then involve an end user to ask them maybe a question because you still need their input for something that you can't figure out of the data or just because you have access to all the information on the internet. You still need that input in that moment, but you will know when, and you know exactly what question to ask, and the LLM will ask you that question. I think we're going to get to a point where, and that's why I call it the business operating system, is that the logical flow is not going to be scripted in advance. The LLM will figure out that logical flow to accomplish a specific objective.
Well, as this space continues to develop, I am positive we're going to have you back for conversations like this one to bring all of us up to speed. Pascal, thank you so much for joining me on the Love Procurement podcast to give us an update and even look at some of those things that are a little bit further down the road.
My pleasure, Kelly, anytime.